everyone, and welcome. I'm really excited about today's session because it's going to be challenging a way that many of us think about security. Usually, when we talk about protecting payment data and system data, the focus is on firewalls, software, and cyber threats. But what is the biggest risk isn't about someone breaking into your systems, but someone physically walking into your building. That's what today is all about. When we say red team, we're not talking about hackers behind a screen. We're talking about physical intrusions. Red teams simulate real world attacks by trying to walk into your building, tailgate, pass reception, drop devices, just like a real attacker would. The goal to find out how easy it is to access your systems, your payment systems, without ever logging in. So, to introduce today's conversation and to help us explore this world, I'm thrilled to be joined by Steve Porter, CEO of SecureNet, one of the top cybersecurity and PCI compliance firms in the industry. Today, Steve is going to walk us through how these engagements work, what a red team looks for, how the attackers are targeting systems and payment systems in ways that catch even the most secure organization off guard. Steve, welcome. It's great to have you here.
Well, thank you, Bernard. It's always a pleasure to talk with you.
So let's jump right into it, Steve. Steve, for those who have never seen a red team in action, can you walk us through what the typical engagement looks like? Maybe give us some sense of how you know, how teams prepare, what to look for, and how to test both physical and digital security in the context of the physical aspect.
Gladly, and I'm just going to say off the top here that if anybody hasn't seen a red team in action before, that just means we're doing our job well. Uh, because technically, really, with a red team engagement, first of all, I guess we'll start with the key difference between a traditional penetration test, which I think most of the audience is familiar with, versus a red team. And a penetration test is more about, hey, let's find all the vulnerabilities, let's find all the exploits, let's show you everything that is wrong with either your network or your devices or your application. Red teaming is a little bit different. It still incorporates all the pen testing techniques, of course, but as you pointed out at the top of this discussion, it also incorporates, physical, social engineering, OSINT or open source intelligence, a lot of reconnaissance and planning. The key thing I think that I want to point out is that with a pen test, we just say, here's the targets we want you to look at. Whereas with a red team, it's more goal oriented. And what I mean by that is that the goals could be something like, say, for your company, Bernard, your goal could be, I want to see if somebody could steal credit card data from us. Whether that's printed, whether that's encrypted on a hard drive, whether it's in a data center located somewhere that you don't tell us about. But the goal is credit card information. Well, our job at that point, unlike a pen test where we would be looking for all of the vulnerabilities and all of the exploits and report on it, our job would be then, let's just get that goal, and it doesn't matter how we do it, whether it's physical, whether it's social engineering, whether it's technical, um, whether it could be paying a third party service provider to plug in a USB stick when they go in to clean the offices at night. All of these things are in scope, so it's more about the goal versus the journey.
What's like some of the most common ways that you've heard or experienced that, you know, where organizations, have vulnerabilities where people can gain access to the physical access through these types of tests?
Common.
And I
Well,
know, I know you can't disclose all your tricks and tips, but what usually are you looking at? Like, how does this take place? I mean, most organizations, most hospitals, for instance,
mhm.
insurance companies saying, well, the doors are closed. And I mean, is your goal to get past those doors? Is the goal to actually, walk in, get into an office, plug something in there, like we
Mhm.
see in a lot of these, a lot of the movies, and gain access to patient data or customer
Mhm.
data, or insurance policyholder data? What are the goals here, and how does this usually work?
So the goals is, I mean, the goals can be different from client to client. That's something that's discussed and agreed upon upfront. The client is usually the one that sets their goals, probably, based on a bit of collaboration and guidance from our team, of course, because sometimes, we get engaged by organizations and they're like, oh, we want a red team. And we ask them, well, do you know what that means? They go, well, yeah, it's a pen test. Like, no, it's a little bit different. So let's have that discussion first. Let's figure out what your key assets are. Let's figure out what is going to have the most impact to you as a business if it were to be compromised in some manner. Um, for instance, like I said, critical data in an energy company, for instance, it could be access to their infrastructure, their operational technology, their industrial control systems. I mean, what would happen if we got access to a system that could shut down a pipeline? That could be,
And when you're saying access, it says, and we know, everybody's familiar, or, there's a lot of talk about and exposure about what happens through the cyber side.
Mhm.
But can you walk us through some of the risks that take place from the physical side? Because, before our conversation, I started thinking, well, we talk about patient data in a hospital. What if I can just walk in, take a USB, plug myself into any, everybody's busy taking care of patients, and plug a USB and then have access to the whole network?
Mhm.
Is your team, that's what your team does, is try to figure out where the vulnerabilities are from the, I understand that you're doing external,
Mhm.
but you're also doing walking in right in through the door as well, right?
So that's part of the reason I was going to go down the energy path was that
Okay, good.
a lot of I don't know. You raise good questions here and clarity. The reason that I was talking about energy is that traditionally, a lot of the industrial control systems that control pipelines and flow of oil and gas and whatnot. Sorry, I'm based here in Calgary, so I have to talk about energy, of course.
Of
But
course.
but a lot of those systems were not internet connected. Now that's changing a bit more in recent years, but in the past, the red teaming was interesting because we would have to get physical access to, a management facility, for instance, that would have the control systems that would access the industrial control. Or in some banks, a lot of their back end systems used to be completely offline. And that was by design. So there wasn't an external, technical or risk. These things have changed. A lot has become more internet accessible. But with that, that means the technology layers for protection have also become much better. So what do? Well, let's go old school. Let's go physical. Let's go and see if we can get into the facility. Let's clone some cards. Let's print out some, access cards that make it look like we belong. Let's walk into the company. I mean, I did one engagement. I was going in another company for 2 months. I was literally part of the furniture there. Like everybody knew me in the morning, said hi, Roger. Like I give them a fake name, of course, and I became so much a part of the organization that nobody questioned me.
So, and I remember a story that you told me, and then we'll talk about the funny aspect, like stories at the end, because I've heard you tell me about some very interesting, funny stories about, trying to actually exit an organization. You've made it all the way to, the air gapped room, because, you talk about digital, like control rooms, and device controls in the banks. And we understand, I mean, the concept of air gapped computer systems is still in existence in certain industries like pharma,
Mhm.
and some other systems. Uh, but how far in within an organization, and I'm saying from experience because I know you've been doing this for decades, uh, how far in could you potentially get into an organization? What kind of data could you access through this physical method of going into the organization?
So the goal of a physical exploitation, I guess, can vary again from engagement to engagement. But the idea is it's usually one of two things. Either we are there to try to physically tag something and say, yes, we could have taken this, and we put like a little sticky on it or something, or an
Yeah.
RFID or a QR code, and be able to tell our client that, hey, if you go into this room on this device, you'll see a QR code that says secured net, and it'll lead you back to our website showing you what we did. So we can do kind of interesting kind of engagements like that where there's no impact to the business, of course, because we don't want to cause downtime. We want to show
Yeah, of course.
possibility. But the
Yes.
other option would be that we would go in and plant a device, and um, I think most people listening in here are familiar with the mini PCs, or I mean, even a cell phone in some cases. We have rigged up some cell phones with some of our attack tools, and we just plug them in over USB to the network. And suddenly we have a back door that now my team back at the office has full remote access to that environment that they did not have because it was air gapped before. So we break the air gap and give our team the cyber access so that they can now do their regular penetration testing and see what's available. So there's lots of different options there.
So I'm going, at the end, I wanted to talk to you about learning, but you've said something very interesting is that, through this process, you've been able to demonstrate to the organization, the leaders of the organization, that there are significant weaknesses in their system, whether it be proprietary IP, on the pharma side, like you said, in oil and gas, to their control systems that control the pipelines, refineries, healthcare data, payment data. What are the learnings? And from your experience, when an organization, I know you've dealt with so many, discovered that there is this, there is a way to in fact get to those air gap systems, or in some organizations they don't have air gap systems and
Mhm.
they feel safe. Usually, what are the next steps for them in order to mitigate this? Like, how do I fix that? I now thought, well, the system is, in my world I felt safe, and now I'm not so safe. What are usually the steps that they take in order to mitigate this?
A great question. And I hate to say it depends because it's such a cliche answer, but um, it really does in a way, because sometimes it comes down to maybe it's just a little bit more security awareness training for the staff. Everybody thinks security awareness is, oh, just don't click on the phishing emails. Well, we've provided training in the past where we actually do a session just like this, and we go in, we meet with companies, we get all their staff together. I start telling stories about the things that our team have done, and start watching people's faces just kind of go a little slack jaw and go, oh, wow, I would have fell for that too. And kind of educating people on how to, because we're here in Canada, how to politely challenge people and see if they actually do truly belong there. And I remember one session in particular I did with a client in Toronto, and I did this session, and this young lady came up to me the next day because we were doing it over a number of days. She came up to me the next day. She's like, Steve, I challenged somebody and I felt good about it. And it turns out he was supposed to be there, but I still challenged him. I did the right thing. I was like, that's great. Whereas the day before, she would have just probably turned a blind eye and not even questioned that person. So, because the thing is that a lot of the times when people do the social engineering and physical testing part of it, a lot of testers tend to have a script or a background story or a scenario in their mind of how they're going to do things. They have a process. And the second that somebody says, "Oh, hey, I'm sorry, I don't think we've met before. Are you new? Or would you mind to come and grab a coffee with me?" Or having some kind of a quote friendly challenge might be enough to throw that person off script or cause them to pause for a second. Oh, well, you know.
So
So
so now, and sorry to interrupt you there. I want to just, I had a thought. How common are these physical attacks that really take place? And I'm not talking about obviously a red team, which is, they're a friendly team. They're there for a purpose, to demonstrate, to show you what your vulnerabilities are, what your weaknesses are, what your oversight is. Uh, but how common is it? Because I want to put it into real perspective. How common is it for organizations and these sectors that we've discussed and to be uh, attacked through this physical, uh, call it, channels?
So I don't know if there's any actual statistics on this. Um, there's definitely if you look at the uh, Verizon data breach reports and stuff that come out, um, they have a lot of statistics on like attacks, mostly from the cyber side. I don't think they do much on physical. I think the physical probably happens a bit more than we give it credit for. I don't. It's nowhere near the level of the cyber attacks, though. That's for sure. Because there's obviously there's some bumps in the road to doing things physical. First of all, you have to have people in that location or in that city or in that part of the world. You have to have people who have information about the environment, people who fit in. Um, like for instance, if I went to, I don't know, India somewhere and tried to do a physical breach, I might stand out a bit. So there's you have to have the right people for the right locations, the right environments, and you know, I, I I don't really have statistics on it. I'm sorry, but I do think it happens more than people are admitting to.
Yeah, no, and look, I mean, I'm saying if somebody is really committed
Hmm.
to accessing information within of an organization, whether it be that policy information or healthcare data that has value,
Hmm.
or even credit card data, because I'm thinking, I've walked in through many different types of organizations through the years, retail, healthcare, where I'm, and I'm thinking like, now that I'm thinking more from a security perspective, how easy would it be to plug in a USB key into a
Hmm.
device that is easily, behind a nurse's desk, or the nurse's station, or any, all these organizations that are so connected, nobody would really think two times before there's a USB plugged in behind a computer,
Hmm.
right? uh, and with the right sophisticated device, and as you said, how easy it is to walk in. uh, is this something that most organizations that have very sensitive data should think about doing and testing? Because we know that we look at PCI, we look at SOC, we look at NIST, we look at all these standards, but majority of the standards focus primarily somehow, or at least they're interpreted to
Hmm.
focus on the digital, call it, layers of the organization, not so much on the physical. And yes, they will ask you things like, oh, do you have, CCTV? Do you have a badge? Do you have, what controls you have? But the majority of it is the digital aspect, not the physical aspect. So
Agreed.
the question is how much focus, how important it is for an organization that has very sensitive assets residing within their organization to actually be doing these types of activities.
Um, as a vendor who offers this service, it's it's difficult for me to say because it sounds a little bit biased, of course. But I feel I think it's very very relevant. I think it's something that most organizations with an advanced security posture should consider. And what I mean by that is if you've already been doing your vulnerability assessments regularly, every quarter or whatever your frequency is, if you're already doing annual pen tests, if you've done the annual pen test 2, 3, 4 years in a row, and now you're at the point where most times you get the report, it's one or two little things standing out that you have to fix. That's great. Now it might be time to look a little bit deeper and say, okay, what's next? And red team might be that. Like if you were a company or a potential client that came to us and said, uh, our CEO just read about this red team thing. We'd love to do it. And I ask you, great, when was your last pen test? And you say, oh, we've never done one. I'd have to tell you right away, you're not ready for a red team. You're going to spend a lot of money and not get the value out of it that you should. So, it's more of a elevated pen test, if you want to call it that. It involves more vectors. It involves more possibilities. So,
But you
it
emulate, if I, from what I've heard you talk, it emulates real life. I mean,
it does. Yes.
again, most organizations, I mean, most businesses focus on let's make sure that I have that firewall. Let's make sure that my computers are patched. But in many occasions, I mean, from what I hear you say, the back door is wide open. I mean, and it happens. So, for leaders listening into this, they need to really, I personally would encourage them and to actually begin to take a look at, if they're talking to their IT team, is to bring
Mhm.
someone who can give them a different perspective on all those other, call them vector points that they're not looking at. Like, again, I always, I feel every time I walk into because we do a lot of business with hospitals, every
Mhm.
time I walk into a hospital, how easy, if I was obviously a RE team member, how easy it would be to actually plug a USB that could give me access to the entire network. Um,
Um,
and, and it's just that the physical elements of it are not designed to keep people out. They're not supposed to be there. And that's really one of the biggest challenges that, we tend to see. Uh, I'm gonna put it to you. I'm gonna ask you, like, and you probably have a lot of examples of this, but what are some of the most overlooked weaknesses, things that companies assume are fine, but are wide open to attacks?
Whew. Yeah, you're right. There's a lot of answers to that. You know, I, I keep talking, or I've said a couple of times here so far. I think that being a Canadian-based company, we have different risks than maybe other parts of the world. We're always we always have the stereotypical Canadians are so nice. They're so helpful, and it's true, especially in a red team. If I'm trying to get into a building and my hands are full and I got a phone wedged under my ear, on my shoulder, and I really can't reach for that badge or reach for that key, 9 times out of 10 somebody's going to hold the door open for me, a secured door at that. And they might glance at my belt or around my neck to see if I have a card that looks like I belong, but I have a printer here that prints those. So all I need is a picture of your access card, and usually we're in. It's almost as simple as that. Um, Typically, again, we'll take the Canadian angle here. If I'm walking in with a box of donuts from Tim Hortons and a box of coffee or a tray of coffees, somebody's going to hold those doors, right? No question about it. So the physical part of it, this kind of goes back to a bit of the staff training. It goes back
Yes.
to some of the other controls. We have had environments where we had one recently that no matter how full our hands were, their staff were taught you scan your card to get in, you come inside the door, you wait for it to close. You do not allow anybody to tailgate. You do not allow anybody in behind you. They have to tap their card as well, no matter what. And that actually caused a bit of a speed bump for us, right? So we've had that. We've had
But
environments
I
where
hear there's a but there.
there's a but, yeah, of course. There's look, where there's a will, there's a way, and
Of course.
where there's hackers, there's wills. Um, so um, I'm not, like you said, I'm not going to give away all my tricks today.
No,
So
no, no, no. I'm
you'll
not.
have
This
to
is
learn
not
another
about
different
tricks, but
process.
it's more about awareness.
Yes.
I'm curious, and this is once again. We understand this is not for everybody, and as you
Mhm.
said, not everybody's even prepared to go through a red team. If you've never done a pen testing, a red team, it's
Mhm.
not even in the horizon because you're not there.
It's
Yeah,
overkill.
but if we're dealing with organizations that have very, very sensitive information and they feel that their intellectual property that are within the systems that even, you know are within the physical aspect, confines, whether it be healthcare, insurance, financial services, R&D, biotech,
Mhm.
pharma, this is something that, you know has to be looked at some point in the horizon. This is whether they're ready today or they're not, for any leader to think, all the security that we need to invest in is on the cyber side. is leaving themselves, from what I've heard you say, is leaving themselves vulnerable to other, walk in through the back door, right? And as you said, if there's training programs in place already, like they've already, like you talked about the tailgating, I mean, they're doing a good job. The question
Mhm.
is, I mean, it sounds to me, given that you talk about being highly motivated, that hackers are very well motivated, and
Mhm.
probably, and we're talking about industries that there's a lot of value in terms
Mhm.
of if they can get in, right? Do you, and I'm not talking statistically because there's no report on this. Do you think organizations are well protected, say system wise? Is it easier once I get through that door and I walk in? Is it easier for me to get to their critical systems that way than if I try to go from the outside?
Undoubtedly, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, without question. The physical approach is largely overlooked in my experience. And as I'd mentioned earlier, we've worked with some very high security facilities over the years, high technical security and moderate physical security. And when we do this, yeah, the first thing they do is like, all right, let's look at the physical part. What can we fix? What can we do? Whether that's additional training or whether that's additional physical controls, more cameras, more monitoring, more turnstiles, more badge in, badge out type of things. There's a lot of different controls that can be done on a physical side now that are more cost effective than they were, say, even 10 years ago. But the physical part of it, gaining that foothold to your network or to your data from a physical side tends to be a lot easier than doing it from the cyber side.
So
Because
if I hear you saying is if you can get past the physical element
Mhm.
side, past that door, it is then easier to get access to whatever systems and data you're protecting or trying to protect from the outside than just trying to get in from the outside.
In my experience, yes.
Okay,
Yes. In our team's
so
experience.
but that's something to consider
Mhm.
because I think leaders who are listening to this, managers who are wondering and feel confident that hey, our IT team or our third party cyber team who's looking at our cyber, right, is going to be the full protection is that they need to start looking at can people walk in right in through our front door because I
Mhm.
and I've talked to so many different customers, nobody really even talks about
Mhm.
that front door. We deal a lot in the healthcare sector,
Yeah.
and yes, they're investing a lot in the cyber element. But when you just walk into the organization, I see so many different opportunities. I'm not saying that I do it because that's not my business, but there's so many opportunities to leverage your visits there. You don't even need to bring Tim Hortons coffee and donuts to actually get in through the door. I mean, you're there. You can be a patient. I can be a patient, walk in and just slide the USB. So I think that for anybody listening into this, I think that you know uh, we are made to feel safe when our teams are taking care of all our cybersecurity. But in very particular industries, I think we need to start looking more and more about the physical. How as the cyber becomes more difficult to get into, those very motivated hackers, as you've said, from a financial perspective, will start looking at the physical as a form of access.
Agreed. And I mean, one of the reasons for that is that, a lot of organizations, the cybersecurity team and the physical security team are still two separate silos. They don't usually interact even. And,
Do you feel that they need to interact more?
oh, if they did, I think, and they were sharing information a lot more, and we've seen this in some environments where they've started to merge those two, it's a lot more effective for sure. Because now the visibility, the alerting, the logging, even from the physical side, gets brought into the cyber side, and the analytics can be done on it, and the visibility. I'll say that term again, is much better.
Now, I'm going to our time is coming up, so I want to leave some thoughts here. because you've given us a lot to think about. Uh, Again, even if when it's interesting because I look at our homes, right? What it was 30 years ago, where we are today. 30 years ago, we left the door open. We left it, the key underneath the mat. The back door was never really locked. Even at night, we left it,
Mhm.
screen doors, only the screen doors and not the doors open. Fast forward 30 years, everybody is locking down their homes, not just it, whether they're actually locking down their internet router at home or not, that's debatable. But everybody is installing cameras. They have the
Mhm.
ring. They've got, multi locks. They're putting as much physical security to protect the valuables in their home, right? Again, we don't know what people are doing about the digital aspect, but what I get the sense of is that organizations are not doing the same as far as their business is concerned. And yes, we're putting a camera, we're putting some door locks, some call it RFID cards,
Mhm.
but the motivation to get into someone's business that has very high valuable IP or data is a lot more than walking into a home. And we know that people break into homes all the time.
Um, yes. So, how do I respond to that? One, it costs a lot more to secure a business than it does a home. If you just look at the software, the hardware, everything else that's required, all the controls, and sometimes, of course, these businesses are in. I'll speak from experience here. 40-year-old buildings that can't really use or give you the latest and greatest when it comes to security. So you have to accommodate. Now, if I wanted to take this from a hacker's perspective, not a red team perspective, why would I bother breaking into the business if I can break into somebody's home and gain access to the business from there? Because most people work from home now.
Now you're giving us a different perspective about. No, I know, which I think that's something that we did not discuss, and most
No, we didn't.
organizations are not looking at. But
I just wanted to
yes,
play devil's advocate a little
no,
bit.
I think it's an incredible, very important point. Is that even today, when half your workforce has gone remote in many businesses, some businesses, maybe more, maybe less,
Mhm.
is that by extension becomes a it becomes a call it an intrusion point for the business itself. We're not going to get into the showing up at someone's home with Tim Hortons box
No.
and books and donuts, but if you actually have your telecom provider showing up and saying, "Oh, I need to repair. I'm checking for, if there's a faulty connection or we have,
Mhm.
you know, that opens up a completely different,
I am
can of
not going
worms.
to
That's
confer
a dark
that
hole.
way.
But you've given everybody here think that on its own just leaves a very big question mark. And I think that most leaders who are listening into this need to start thinking about their homes, the homes of their employees as well as and the physical aspect of that as an extension of their business.
Well, it I would look at it this way: is that every employee that works from home is basically a remote office now. Right
Yes.
now, during a red team engagement, though, I'll be fair. It's not very likely that you're going to be able to give permission to a red team to attack somebody's home or attempt to infiltrate someone's home. But the vector is there. It's something to consider.
Agree. But I think that that's one of the values that a red team expert such as your team, your secured net does,
Mhm.
can have those real conversations with the leaders of the organizations to help them understand that it's not just about that, like you said, the building that they're in or their assets on their data center is, or even the computers of their employees, is how they can actually access. these computer systems, these internet routers that are at home. And I mean, that's for a completely different conversation. But as a red team, you know, expert, that is part of the conversation that could be have. And I
Agreed.
think that that's a very important one. You've left with a lot of thought. I mean, I think a lot of people who are listening to this will start walking down the hallways of their business, watching. You know, one of the things that I'm staying and I'm staying with me is we need to be more vigilant and training. You know, I'm going to go back to it. Like you talked about training, and training is critical,
Hmm.
and that's a really important place to start, whether you're ready or not is start really looking at the training elements. And you know, an organization, a company like yours, I mean, I do know that you do a lot of training in terms of staff training for employees that will help them both on the digital and of course on the physical side. So now, Steve, thank you for your insights and showing us what security looks like through the eyes of attackers. You know, if there's one takeaway today, it's protecting your data, your payment data isn't just about the tech. It's about what's happening at the front door, in your lobby, in your terminals, and your back door. For everyone rethinking their physical security right now, this is the time to act. So, thanks to everyone who's listening in. Stay alert, stay secure, and we'll see you the next time. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Bernard.